let's kind of like talk about the actual show itself. Now, it's if you don't know what NAMM is, it's basically the music instrument industry, live sound industry, showing what they're putting out in the market this year. So there's typically, product announcements and some hullabaloo, and just about every major manufacturer is there. And this year was unique because both Fender and Gibson were back, sort of. They have not participated in the past few NAMMs. I think it's been since around
COVID, right?
Yeah, I think so. But they weren't really there other than for dealers and certain members of the press. You couldn't actually go into their booths or see anything. So while there may have been a presence, it wasn't necessarily something that you felt. And there were a couple of announcements from them, but nothing really groundbreaking. So it was just kind of strange. You would see their logos. Gibson had set up like one of the guitar thrones where they put the pieces of the guitar and you can take pictures on it. But that's literally the only interaction with Gibson most people had at the convention. And I think it also left a lot of room for smaller companies to kind of take up space. And I don't think that's what those two companies would have intended, but it really kind of shifted the conversation away from them. And I guess the biggest name that had come back was Marshall. They had a massive booth and they were doing performances and they had a bunch of really interesting pieces. But I don't know, the vibe was weird over there. And they've got some cool stuff coming down the pipe and none of it's available yet. It's a weird situation for them specifically. The coolest thing that happened on the first day, and it was getting the chance to meet JT and John from the Patreon group. They were wandering around and we just kind of all found each other. And when I saw John Walsky, who's from Vegas, I'd met him last year at NAMM. He was wearing the guitar company name shirt that's in the merch store. And I also happen to be wearing that shirt. So there's literally two people on the planet who have that shirt and we both wore it on the same day.
Love it.
I should have bought a lottery ticket because the odds were too good.
Yeah.
For that one. We got a chance to catch up. And I mean, that's really what NAMM is for most of us, is like getting a chance to see people you only see once a year and do, NAMM things together. So it was great.
Great.
Let's talk about the stuff itself. Now, we've got a unique perspective because, there was mostly guitar things, but lots of live sound, lots of production, lots of other really cool products. And I just wanted to kind of run off my favorites or things that really stood out to me. One thing that was really interesting is that the entire show had this kind of 80s bend to it. It seemed like every single station had some neon kind of out there 80s kind of vibe to it. Okay. The real standouts were Cower in the boutique showcase. They had these crazy pink and white and blue, like paint splattered offerings. They were gorgeous. Cool. And every time I see a Cower, I was like, these are the greatest guitars. I wish I could afford to own one. And I can't because they cost as much as a car. But Doug is the nicest guy. And I went over and talked to him for a while. He's actually in one of the videos that I hope to put out this week. Beyond that, we talked about the Rockman. It was definitely a very popular piece of gear that everybody was talking about. And
I'm sure you got to demo it, right?
I did. It is absolutely worth the hype. It does exactly what it says it can do. And I'm trying to figure out a scenario where I could use it as my sound engine. The real thing is just trying to figure out the stuff that it doesn't do that you could fill a board with. Right. Because it's got the chorus, but it doesn't have like delay or reverb. And would you want something that's like accurate to the era, or would it be something that's kind of like a modern take on a classic thing? But I think I could do it with like 2 pedals or less and have like a full 80s rig.
Yeah. The videos I've been seeing about it have been pretty stunning.
Yeah. And I mean, it is a very specific flavor of guitar sound and not for everybody. Yes. And I definitely had a lot of folks that weren't at the show going like, it doesn't, that's not good. It's not a good sound.
No, like, it's not. No, it's not. But I mean, those of us who wore one of those on our belt and drove our guitar into cheap ass earbuds, like there's a real vibe there. Not only does it sound like some classic recordings, it sounds like what it sounded like in the music room at my high school when I was playing through the original one of those, you know.
Yeah, I said that if it sounded like the intro to Hysteria, I would get one, and it did,
It
and
does.
I am.
Yeah, it does.
So, done deal. The craziest 80s throwback, though, and this was something that like was genuinely shocking to people in attendance. PV reissued a bunch of their 80s era amps.
Huh. Wow.
The big ones being that they're doing a Josh Homme signature Decade, which is it's literally like a 10-inch speaker, like a tiny little amp, but that's, you know, a big part of his sound. And they also took all of their famous retro amp series and they made pedals for them.
Wow.
So you can get a PV Bandit, you can get all of these different sounds. And again, yeah, it's confounding and confusing to those of us who lived through that era. But again, there's just certain things that.
Yeah, no, listen, the last time I heard a PV Bandit was at a pawn shop in Salt Lake City when I was about 18. And I wanted it. I didn't buy it.
Well, guess what?
Now I can get it in a pedal. That's
Now's your chance.
That's very, very cool.
Well, and it's funny because like you were giving me this funny look, but we literally just said the exact opposite of what, you know, you were thinking about the Rockman when you're like, because every single one of those amps means a lot to a particular kind of musician.
That's right. That's right.
And
that's right. Yeah.
It was pretty cool to go into their booth and see a bunch of these old school silver badge amps. Like I remember in the church music room.
Yep.
That had been there since Lord knows when.
Yeah. I mean,
no
I
pun
owned a
intended.
PV solid state. It wasn't even good, you know, but it was what I had. It was my first amp.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great.
Everybody that went in there and checked them out was like, this is a really interesting idea. And frankly, something they should have done earlier. I mean, those are the products that they are known for.
Yeah.
Outside of, you know, the 5150 type stuff.
Right.
It's such a neat idea.
I'll say this too. It's very validating to somebody who's just stepped into the 80s world, like that is suddenly a movement that's happening. You know, usually nostalgia comes in waves, right? It follows current time by 20 or 30 years or something.
Yep.
And 80s, I've been wondering if 80s was just kind of falling away and it was going to be like the 50s, like very nichey if you were going to think back to it. But maybe not. Maybe we're catching a new wave.
80s was like the vibe of the show.
Okay.
The amount of splatter finishes on things that I saw.
You said a bunch of pictures that looked great. They looked
It
so
was
cool.
pretty wild. There was an SJC kit that had like pink splatter on black. There were multiple splatter guitars at the G&L booth. G&L, honestly, one of my favorite showings at NAMM. They had this tiny little booth, especially compared to like, you know, all of the others, but what they had there was really phenomenal, and had a really great conversation with those guys and just played pretty much everything at the booth, and it was all amazing. So if you haven't checked out G&L recently, you should look into it because the stuff that they're putting out this year is pretty rad.
Cool.
Now, as far as guitars go, I played a bunch of them and I really like the Cowers, but I think the best guitar that I played was at this tiny stand called Grisinia Guitars. I was introduced to them through my buddy Jeff, who works with them. Their product offerings kind of unique, kind of more of like the sludgy, doomy kind of deal. They actually had an Evertuned RD shape with a full aluminum neck, like as doom metal as you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
But they also had this metal hollow flake black Explorer with custom Seymour Duncans that matched the finish of the guitar. It was by far the best guitar I played there, and it was shocking. Like I was blown away. I sat there and I played that guitar probably more than any other the entire show. So you should find them on social media. I follow them on Instagram. It's GRZENIA, Grisinia Guitars.
Making it up. Hard
to spell, but yeah, their stuff is really, really cool.
And you type that first word in, the second word that Google prompts you with is guitars, and then you know you spelled it right.
But yes, if you like anything pointy or doomy, they're your folks. And they were right across from Dunnable, which is again another kind of doomy.
Listen, there's some offset looking things there. I wouldn't say they're
Mhm.
all pointy and doomy.
Well, the ones that I like were.
Oh, well, fair. I mean, there's an SG looking guy, there's a Jag looking guy. They have some options.
Yeah. They also were giving out hot sauce. If you shredded at their booth, you would get a free bottle of
Sweet.
hot sauce.
Sweet.
So I got one of
Right.
those floating around somewhere.
Awesome.
The other two things that I really want to talk about are products that little off the beaten path, not necessarily something that you would think about, but if you had them, you would appreciate them a lot. So the first one is called the LilyPad, and it is one of those things that like I feel like every single person that listens to this show and plays with a band should have. And that is it's a small pad that you lay on the ground and it's got a cable coming out of it. And it is a microphone ducking system basically. It's not a gate per se, but the way that it works is you step on the pad and it raises the volume of your microphone instantly. And then when you step off of it, it ducks it down. So it
Huh.
doesn't fully turn it off and you have three levels that you can select from, but the number of times that we have been in a place where we had opted to bring live drums and there was just like nothing we could do in regards to keeping the cymbals from coming through the vocal mics,
Yeah.
I would have killed for two or three of these things.
So the idea is you step off it and it ducts your mic out and stops stage bleed.
Right.
Huh.
So anything other than what your body would have blocked is reduced considerably.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
I tried it out and I probably like freaked out on the guy a little bit because I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. I can't believe nobody's thought of this before. And we had a really good conversation and I hope to get one or two and take them for a spin.
Does the signal pass through it or
Yeah, it comes with like a pedal shaped unit that microphone XLR goes into, microphone XLR
yeah.
comes out of, and
Okay.
there's some dip switches that you can select the amount of rebound time that you have and then the level of ducking that it does.
Okay. That sounds smart.
But it's cool because it's basically a mechanical product. It's not something that can necessarily fail. He said they've sold X number of them and they don't have a repair department. Like they none of them have failed. So
Alright.
that's
Good.
that's pretty good.
Yeah.
If we get a chance to work with them, you will be hearing about that a lot more. But now I want to talk about what I consider to be the product of like the NAMM product.
I think I have
And
a hint at what this is.
most people are going to disagree with me, but I feel like I feel pretty justified in my selection. And this was a product that was released by Rev Amps, mostly well known for their really incredible high gain
Yeah.
amp heads. But this isn't an amp. It is something totally unique that up to this point, I don't think anybody has thought of or had done commercially. And when I saw it, I actually didn't think it was a commercial thing. I thought it was just like a promo deal that they did for their booth. So when you walked up to Rev's booth at the show, they had like 4 full amp stacks. And instead of speaker grills in those, those 4x12 cabs, they had LED panels.
Yeah.
And in this span of cabinets, they have made like a widescreen display and they were playing videos on it. And I walked up to them as like, this is fantastic. That was really smart for you guys to do for the show. And they were like, oh no, this is a product. We're selling these. And I did something very similar to what I did to the poor guys down at LilyPad. My eyes got real big and I was like, do you realize what you've done? And I don't think they had. Because when I was talking to the main guy, he was like, oh, Tremonti bought 20 something of these and this band bought 80 of that. It's like, no, there's an entire subgroup of people that there are many more of than big name touring acts that could use these for their show production. Because immediately I was like, I don't care how much they cost. I'm buying at least 2 of them.
Yeah.
Because that is crazy production value that you can add for what I consider to be a fairly reasonable price.
Do you know the price?
I do know the price. I'm not sure if it's out there yet, but it's a lot. But as a person who has sourced out LED displays elsewhere,
Well,
it was
yeah.
surprisingly reasonable.
Okay.
Now, the display that they had was probably over 20 grand, but not everybody needs that many.
Right.
I'm just saying, putting a cab on either side of the drum set, uh, man, that would be a really huge upgrade. And I think that, I think venues would be silly to not get into these, if you were like a backline company, or, bands like ours. Like, that's what I was trying to tell, was like, bands that are still playing out and making good money, like, this is a really compelling product for them. I thought it was an absolute genius move, because we all know that, I mean, we play modelers. And so our need to purchase things from amp companies has pretty much diminished to nothing.
Right.
So for them to kind of look at the market and go, here's an interesting opportunity that we can take advantage of regardless of whether they play our gear or not.
Right.
That takes a level of ingenuity and cleverness that I was truly blown away. I was like, this is the smartest thing I've ever seen, because now I want to buy. I left a bunch of messages. I'm being a lot. I'm not gonna lie, but I really want them super bad. Even just down here in the dungeon, just to like set up.
Yeah, next to Elvis back there, blink away
Yeah,
behind you. Yeah,
obviously, that's what I need.
totally.
So yeah, and listen, there were tons of other things that I really enjoyed. There were, lots of other guitars and pedals and gear and stuff, but those were the ones that really jumped out at me. I did go and check out the QSCs. They did sound really good. They had like a 3 or 4 piece jazz ensemble playing through them, filled the room pretty well. So I think there's some there. You're probably gonna have to check it out for yourself to see if that's gonna, fill the space that we thought they would.
Well, Electro Voice came out with two new models of the EV range that I use the M50s of. There's now a 75 and a 90 that are like way more power and way more power.
Yep.
And yeah, it's pretty compelling stuff.
I did see those. The base model, like where the sub was massive. Like like they didn't have them powered like pushing sound out, but I can imagine that it was like pretty considerable.
Yeah, because I've had to add an 18-inch sub to my M50s, and it made a big difference. Just pulling the poor man's cutover out of those stacks cleaned them up a lot, and was well worth doing. But boy, if they have solved that for band and big space DJs, that's great. That's really what was needed in that range. So,
but I mean, that kind of proves the point that we had made, is like, is QSC a little late to the game at this point? Because if they're putting out like Rev 3, Rev 4 of these products, they've had enough time to really dial them in.
Right. It's interesting that EV is not doing the built-in mixer feature in those 2 larger SKUs. I don't know what that's about. Both of my 50s are the mixer version of them, and I use that for acoustic all the time.
Right.
So I don't know. It's interesting trade-off.
They're probably just looking at that, like, again, who's primarily going to be using them and what kind of capacity they're using them for.
For sure.
They're probably like, let's put, whatever resources that we would have put into that into like beefier amps or whatever.
Yeah. 100%.
So yeah, that's pretty much NAMM in a nutshell. I mean, it was so much. It was a lot of fun getting the chance to meet you guys and other creators, and seeing famous people walking around like they're just like normal folks. And it was wild. And if you get the chance to do it, I highly recommend it. And if you do, we should set a meetup there, because it was a lot of fun.
I'll say my FOMO is off the charts. So we'll need to find a way to
Listen,
get both of us out there for the next one.
On day 1, I clocked over 18,000 steps. I don't think
I couldn't have made it this time, but in a year, I'll be ready.
All right. It's a date then.
Okay.
If you have any specific questions about the show or products or anything like that, shoot us an email, coverbandconfidential@gmail.com. I mean, I've just got 3 days worth of gear news like shoved into my face. So
you're not going to talk about on our shared notes here. You mentioned weird stuff. You're not going to get into that.
I guess so. I mean, every year there's always, a few things. Now, in previous years, they had a lower level in the guitar area And then they refer to it as the basement or the dungeon. But this year it was also where Will Call was for your passes. So you had to walk through it at least once. And it's typically the place where the most innovative products are going to be because they're smaller booths. They cost less money. It's usually startups and that kind of thing. And I had a lot of really good conversations with people on that level. That's where I saw the LilyPad, and there was a couple of other products. I had mentioned something about a locking tuner system that I want to get some more information about. That might be cool for guys who like Floyd's, but want to be able to play things in different tunings, gig to gig. But there were some oddballs for sure. Top of the list is the automatones. I feel like we've talked about those before. It's like the little kind of synthy thing that looks like a music note, and it's got a mouth that you squeeze. And
I have one around here somewhere.
Yeah, we've got one also. And their booth is one of the funnest ones there. And the guy who's like the inventor of it comes to the show and does demos and stuff. It's awesome. Really something. Then in the basement, I found a couple of products. There was this one had this it was like a circle around the strings that had these little kind of plectrums you could attach to them, and it would spin, and depending on the height of whatever the circle was, it would pick in this kind of like rhythmic pattern. It was a lot, and you can go online and see demos of it. I don't know what I would use something like that for, but I guarantee you somebody out there would see that and be like, think that's pretty cool.
For sure. Someone's going to write a great indie tune that depends on that.
For sure. I was excited about this, and then I wish there was a little more to it, but I found a manufacturer that was doing Telecasters, but they were shaped like 8-bit video game style. So like a pixelated telly.
Cool.
And it looked really cool, but it was like this weird, like blue, yellow burst thing. I was like, I don't really dig that color. And the price was definitely right, but I was like, does it come in any other color? Like, nope, just these two. I was like, ugh, can't do anything with that. If it was like just like a monochromatic thing, like black or white or something, like, no, they didn't have that though. And then the one that definitely drew the most attention was the fart pedal. And it wasn't just a fart pedal. They were kind of showing off their entire line of fart pedals, selling merch in, I mean, they were on the main floor, in an area where, there was a fair amount of foot traffic. So they probably sold more t-shirts than they sold pedals as far as that goes, but it was definitely something that everybody was talking about.
I'm sure.
So rock on fart pedal.
Rock on fart pedal. That's our next t-shirt.
I mean, yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Why not?
I mean, I feel like every design, we sell a couple of them. So yeah, we'll just do one. And if you want it, we'll make it. Rock on fart pedal. With that being said, I think it's probably time to wrap it up.
Let's do it.
Want to go ahead and thank Sweetwater again for the trip. It was absolutely incredible. And all of the folks from the hashtag NAMM House, y'all keep doing what you're doing, and can't wait to see you again, and thumbs up and all that good stuff.
And I'll catch you next year.
Yes.